Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
You're listening to Inside OUTA.
Welcome to Inside OUTA, the radio show that touches base with key industry leaders. I'm your host, Bernadette, from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Today we speak to Naleli Morojele, a gender and transformation scholar and practitioner. She's currently reading for a doctorate degree in feminism and decolonization in institutions of higher learning. She was actually recently recognized as one of the top 10 gender and reconciliation activists in Africa by the Institute of Reconciliation and Justice. We talked to her about issues affecting women in political leadership and actually what is the appropriate narrative. Stay tuned.
Less corruption, more accountability. Stay tuned to Inside OUTA.
Naleli, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Bernadette, for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Yes, we really appreciate the time. Naleli, South African politics and business is taking an interesting mold. And I say mold because it feels like it hasn't been fully crafted into what we'd like it to be. Women are being put in leadership, and growth is something that we're seeing, though I think with a pinch of salt. What is your view on women leadership in the political arena?
I think in terms of political leadership, we are doing better than most countries in the world. Currently, South Africa has the 10th highest representation of women in parliaments in the world, and this is largely the Congress. We also have a lot of women in the executive and cabinet. And women are also just really very throughout society. But the problem with this visibility is that it gives us a false sense of progress, right? Yeah. So there has been a lot of progress in terms of women's leadership since 1994, but institutions and cultures remain untransformed. And so there really hasn't been substantive change in terms of women's leadership. You know, young black women in particular in this country experience, the highest rate of unemployment in the country. And so while we do have many visible women leaders in politics, it really hasn't trickled down into society in the way that we really need it to.
Okay. Naleli, do you believe that the media has a big role to play? Because I believe that it feels as if the media is almost against women. There's a certain way of portrayal, and the narrative then comes out quite contrary to the way we'd like it to be. Are women redefining the narrative of leadership in South Africa and the rest of the continent?
Okay, I think at the moment we are not really having a narrative or discourse or even a mass movement about shaping and redefining women's leadership in South Africa. We're just not having that conversation at the moment.
Okay. Now, Lily, if you remember last year at the ANC election, the media kept referring to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as Jacob Zuma's wife. In fact, the media referred to the women in the Jay-Z camp and often referred to them as the Jay-Z ladies, as opposed to referring to them in their ministerial titles. What is the acceptable narrative as a feminist, and why is referring to women as ladies not acceptable in your view?
Yeah, well, I think it was a very patriarchal to call women leaders ladies. Whether we agree with their politics and their behavior or not, still owe them respect because of where they are, right? Mm-hmm. We do not call men leaders gentlemen, right? So, and the ladies, the word itself, ladies, right, is very loaded, right? It carries the implication of a kind of a demure, a docile, a well-behaved, very subservient woman. Yeah. And so I think our South African media is a very powerful space. It's extremely powerful in terms of holding our leaders accountable. But in terms of these types of narratives, the media does have to do better. And I think part of the problem, right, is that those that shape these narratives in the media and also outside of the media, they're not really trained in gender sensitivity. They do not necessarily understand what patriarchy is and its nuances, equality. And so I think we need, in the country, some kind of sensitization, right? Yeah. Because you'll find even the most educated people have these kinds of biases, even they are not aware of. So we do need to have conversations right now on this show.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective. I mean, I think it's we're in Africa, and I feel that sometimes the narrative is not something that we as Africans were really bothered by. I mean, as a young African woman, I really don't have an issue with whether I'm called a lady or woman. Why do you think that I should have an issue with it, irrespective of the patriarchy? Is there really need for it, in your opinion?
For changing kind of the language.
Yes.
That's what you're asking.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. I think so, because it forms part of our socialization, right? And language and the words that we use do carry weight, do carry power. I mean, we use language to convey meaning, right?
Okay.
So if the language that you're using has a lot of implicit biases, carries patriarchy, then that meaning will be not only transferred through our discourses, but then transferred into the way we think about ourselves, right? So it's so important that for women we use empowering language, positive language, language that doesn't diminish women, right? I know, for some of us, we are in spaces where, we may have a lot of self-confidence in ourselves, right? We may know our worth and our value, but kind of on a structural level, it is really so important for us to really engage on the language that we use.
Okay. Okay, I see your point about language, and it's absolutely right. There's power in words and the way we communicate, and how you refer to someone will obviously become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, Lily, I was quite interested in an article that you wrote in the Daily Maverick titled Dlamini Zuma and Hillary Clinton, Sexism, Racism and Party Fractures Make a Perfect Political Storm. Now, first of all, that is a great title.
Thank you.
In the article, you mentioned how despite Donald Trump's derogatory statements about women, he still managed to secure 52% of women votes, in spite of Hillary Clinton's attempt to attract women vote with the promises to shatter the glass ceiling. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that as women we don't put each other into power? And it's almost as this narrative that women are always trying to put each other down. Is that the narrative, or is it just that there's still no confidence in women leadership?
I think important thing is most of the women.
You think what? Sorry,
for Donald Trump. So that it's important to note that most of the women voted for Donald Trump, the 50% women, right?
Okay.
So there's the element of race in it, right?
Okay.
So it's not just a gender issue. So, in a patriarchal society such as, the United States and South Africa, everyone is socialized to view women as lesser, right? Women themselves, we are socialized to view ourselves as less than men, right? And we are socialized to see men as smarter, as more logical, more naturally skilled at leadership, and so on, right? So this socialization then impacts us. For example, when it was time to vote, we're more likely to want a male leader.
Sure.
And I mean, we also saw this, for example, in our own context. We saw during Jacob Zuma's rape trial, how many women supported him, including the ANC Women's League, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, these types of things happen because some women may receive some kind of material or social status benefits from aligning themselves to powerful men, right? So sometimes it serves their kind of individual or group needs to align themselves with men, right? Where, their experience of gender inequality then takes a backseat, because not all women are feminists or womanists or believe in gender equality. Some women do subscribe to patriarchy because for some women it does benefit them in some ways, right? And so I think this is something that happened in the U.S. where, these white women who voted for Donald Trump, their allegiance clearly was kind of more along racial lines than along gender lines. And so that's why, sensitization and even, making women aware of how gender equality is very important.
Sure. And do you think that there was a parallel in the outcome with Nkosazana Dlamini being voted as the ANC president? Or not being voted out, to be voted into, actually?
That one was such a complicated case, right? Because of all the factionalism taking place in the ANC, and also the general mood in South African society, right? Because Benny Zuma was so aligned to Jacob Zuma, and Jacob Zuma was losing popularity, I think, the fact that she is a woman, I think it did play a role in her not being elected. I think it was due of the political environment at the time. Definitely, I think, the did play a significant role in her not being elected.
Okay. The recent state capture, as you know, the Zondo Commission's underway. We saw the likes of women like Lynn Brown and Faith Mutambi implicated, whilst women like Feki Mentor felt humiliated with the arrogance of the Gupta family and the proposal. Do you think women are easy targets for corruption? What are your thoughts?
Okay. I think actually, the opposite has been found in research, right? So some studies have been done to find out the relationships between corruption and gender equality. And it's actually been found that where there are higher levels of women's leadership in a country, that country would tend to have lower levels of corruption. Mm-hmm. So I think based on the research, it wouldn't be correct for us to say that women are necessarily easy targets for corruption. Okay. But I think context matters, right? I think it's not necessarily that women are more honest, so they're less likely to be corrupt. I think it's because, the studies themselves have found that, where high levels of corruption, ordinary women are more likely to go into politics, where, for example, where they see corruption impacting on important services such as healthcare, right? And women are more likely to want to enter politics where they feel that they can make a change. But it's also found in these studies that women are more risk averse. So, for example, women are less likely to either offer or accept a bribe. Mm-hmm. So that is interesting finding. So I don't think that women are necessarily easy targets for corruption, but I do think that context does matter. And I think within our own South African context, we do need to do some research to find out actually, what is it like for women's leadership and corruption? Is there an impact? Is there a causal relationship between these two things? I think it's not sure if any studies exist in South Africa, but I think it's something worthwhile to look into.
I appreciate the research, and it's also something that I found. But what I found contradictory to the research is, and especially in a specific case, and I'm talking about Batabile Dlamini. She was recently assigned to the role of the Women's League president and served as the Minister of the Social Development Department. And she's alleged to be quite cavalier about the SASSA social grant. It's quite an unusual stance considering the research that you just spoke about, that women leaders are more responsible and the expectation for them is that they're more protective. It's quite an unusual stance. Do you see these individual cases rising up, or is it just the narrative or the dynamic in South Africa?
I think in our context, unfortunately, in South Africa, I don't think that Tabile Dlamini is unusual. Maybe it's more disappointing, right? That, the whole SASSA saga happened. I think partly is that, as you were saying, we do actually have higher expectations of women leaders, right? We expect them to do better than their male counterparts. We expect them to be more accountable, more responsive, more caring to their constituencies, to their people. And so, the disappointment in terms of Batabile Dlamini and how she handled SASSA really is valid. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of a double-edged sword to it, right? Because we do hold women to higher standards, right? And we want more women leaders and we want better leadership. But that means that then we are even enforcing gender inequality even more, because now there's a higher standard for women than men leaders, right? Mm-hmm. And what we want in terms of gender equality is that we want men and women to be held to the same standard, and so we really have to increase our expectations in terms of our male leaders, right?
Yeah. One of the political parties that actually got this right is the EFF. They've managed to play a key role in gaining women votes, and especially in putting women in leadership positions. What do you think they got right? How do you think they went about it?
I think I think the EFF personally learned from the ANC. The ANC in 1994 was really the first political party in the country to really put a significant number of women into political power.
Yeah. And
I think the EFF is doing that. But I think the EFF is very strategic, right? And it has a very good sense of the mood in the country and what is going on. I think we have a young generation of people in this country who are becoming extremely despondent with the country and the government. They're extremely disappointed with the state of affairs in the country. And I think, this generation then naturally includes women, right, who are experiencing some of the worst problems that we have in this country, like extreme levels of poverty and unemployment and high levels of violence. Women tend to experience those kinds of things, very severely.
Yeah.
So I think the EFF has been very strategic in terms of targeting this particular demographic.
Okay.
I think generally the EFF has become a space where all young people can find expression to their feelings, their discontent, their need for change. And so I think also something the EFF has done that other parties isn't doing is it's placed an emphasis on education and educating even themselves as leaders, which I think that we are not seeing so much in the other political parties. And we know in our country, through the Must For movement, that our young generation really is very committed to education and places a high value on education.
Okay.
So I think that's another way that we've been able to tap into that kind of demographic. So I think they've just read the room really well, and I think that that is why they're succeeding with the youngest generation.
Okay. All right. What I found, especially in researching this interview with Naleli, is that the narrative of the perception of women still continues, and we still have a long way to go, in my opinion. And I really appreciate you coming on and actually putting some perspective. What advice do you have for young women, young feminists who are interested in leadership roles but still have to contend with the dynamics of the patriarchal society or the patriarchal perspective?
Yeah, I think, what you said is very important, that we need not just young women, but we need more feminist women, right, in these spaces. So important that, we don't just advocate for any kind of woman, but we want really the right kind of women who are going to push, our agendas. So I think in terms of advice, I think it's, young women, we just really have to have a thick skin, I think, especially being in very patriarchal spaces. I think we have to be prepared for the attacks that come in terms of being a strong woman and a outspoken woman. I think just generally being in public spaces, you are under a lot more scrutiny. And so I think, women have to be prepared for that and take it as just part of the journey and part of what's necessary for us to be able to make a change in the country. So I think really just having a thick skin and being committed to the cause.
Wow, this has been such an interesting discussion, Naleli, and I really appreciate you for making the time and giving us a fresh perspective to tap into young minds like yourself. How do people get a hold of you on social media? I'm
on Twitter at Naleli Morojele, so that's NALELI MOROJALE. So that's my Twitter handle. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's really been a great conversation.
All the best to you and keep up the good work, Naleli. Thank you so much for your time. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in with us, and join us again next week as we tap into influencers who steer South Africa towards accountability. Stay tuned.
Harnessing the power of talk radio. Brandlive.co.za